My daughter chuckled as I stood on her porch, soaked from head to toe, holding 2 paper bags of groceries. "You're late," she said, smirking. Then under her breath, almost like a joke to herself, she murmured, "To think, some people actually aspire in this life." I didn't respond, just nodded, wiped my hands on my hoodie, and turned away. The next morning, when she opened the bag, her face drained of color. Underneath the almond milk and kale, she found something I never thought I'd take back. Her voice cracked when she called me. "Dad, what is this?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I simply said, "It's what you deserved." What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. They say the hardest part of growing old is watching your children forget who you used to be. I never really believed that, until the night my daughter chuckled at me from her dry doorstep while I stood there soaked to the bone, balancing 2 paper bags and a gallon of milk in my hands. The rain had started just as I pulled up to her condo building, one of those sleek, modern developments that never quite felt like home, even on the inside. I'd parked in the fire lane, like always, because she wouldn't bother buzzing me up. No umbrella, no jacket, just an old hoodie and the same tennis shoes I've worn for the past 5 years. But I was there, groceries in hand, as I was every Thursday night. She opened the door with her phone in one hand, thumb still scrolling. Barefoot, fresh manicure, hair pulled back into one of those effortless buns that probably took 30 minutes to do. She didn't even look up at first, just stood there with that half smile, half smirk she'd inherited from her mother. "You're late," she said, with a chuckle that wasn't warm. The kind that lets you know you've disappointed someone, even if they never expected much in the first place. I nodded, tried to laugh it off. "Traffic." She stepped aside and let me in, but not before dropping a little grenade behind her. Just loud enough to be heard, just quiet enough to pretend she didn't mean it. To think, some people actually aspire in this life. I froze for half a second, just long enough to feel it land. Not just the words, but the weight of them. I turned to glance at her, but she was already halfway back into her kitchen, fingers tapping her phone screen like the moment had never happened. I set the groceries down on her counter. Eggs, vegetables, bread, the almond milk she insisted on, 2 cartons of that overpriced yogurt she liked, and then I wiped my hands on my hoodie. Not because they were wet, because I didn't want to wipe them on her things. "Is there anything else you need?" I asked quiet. She didn't look up. "No, I'll Venmo you later." I nodded again. I nodded too much these days, like a man trying to stay agreeable just to keep the peace. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, then walked toward the door. I didn't say goodbye, and neither did she, just like every Thursday for the past year. But that night, I didn't drive home. I sat in the parking lot for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel like I was bracing for a crash that had already happened. The rain made patterns on the windshield, and I just watched them. I thought about her words, not just what she said, but how she said it. To think, some people actually aspire in this life. It wasn't the first time she'd made me feel small, not even the 10th. But something about the way she said it, like she was talking to herself, like I wasn't even worth the full attention of her insult, that was new. And it stung in a place I didn't know I still had. I remembered the first time I ever held her, 28 years ago in a cramped hospital room. Her mother had just come out of surgery, and I was left alone with this tiny, crying bundle. I was terrified, but I held her, and I promised her 2 things, that I'd always protect her, and that I'd give her a better life than mine. And I did. God help me, I did. I worked overtime for years. I missed weddings, birthdays, sleep, health checkups, just to make sure she had braces, dance lessons, field trip money, everything. I went without so she could have, and I never kept score. Not until she started treating me like the help. That night, I made a quiet decision. The next morning, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. I didn't brew coffee, didn't read the paper. I just stood in my kitchen and thought about every moment she'd chipped away at me over the years. Every ugh, Dad, when I asked too many questions. Every eye roll. Every time she left my texts on read for days. Every birthday she missed. Every moment I swallowed my hurt and told myself, she's busy. She's just stressed. She doesn't mean it. I went into the closet and pulled out a box. Inside was a folder of papers I hadn't touched in almost a year. The house deed, bank statements, a letter I'd never given her. At the very bottom, a brown paper bag I'd saved, an old one from the time I packed her lunch in 5th grade. It still had her name written in marker on the side, a little heart next to it. I packed her groceries in that bag. And then, at the bottom, I added something else. A manila envelope, sealed. Inside it was a signed document transferring the house, my house, back into my name. I had legally gifted it to her 2 years ago, as part of my estate planning. A silent gift. A legacy move. I'd figured it would make her proud, or at least feel loved. But she didn't need it. She needed a mirror. So I gave her one. No note this time. No explanation. Just the documents. Neatly tucked under a head of kale and her fancy yogurt. When I dropped off the bag, she wasn't home. I left it on her doorstep. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Fitting. By the time she called me, it was almost noon. The phone rang 3 times before I answered it. I didn't jump to pick it up. I was in the garage, sanding down a wooden bench I'd been fixing for months now. It was one of those projects you tell yourself you'll finish someday. And that morning, someday finally arrived. Her name lit up the screen. Just Marissa. No heart emoji, no my baby girl. I deleted those things from the contact months ago. Dad? She said, breathless, sharp, like the word was a slap. I let the silence stretch for a second before responding. Yes. What the hell is this? I'm guessing you found the envelope. Her voice cracked just a little. Why would you? Why would you do something like this? I could have told her 100 reasons. I could have pulled out every moment I swallowed over the years and laid them on the table like cards. But instead, I just said, because I thought it was time. She exhaled, slow and heavy. You're being dramatic. No, I said softly. I'm being honest. There was a pause, long enough to hear her shifting around. I imagined her standing in her pristine kitchen, marble counters, stainless steel, everything, holding that paper bag like it had turned to ash in her hands. You know what this makes me look like? She finally snapped. That right there. Look like, not feel like, not what this means between us. Just optics, reputation, appearances. I don't care how it looks, I said. I care how it felt. She laughed, dry and mean. You're punishing me because I made a joke? No, Marissa, I said. I'm drawing a line because you forgot I'm a person. She hung up, and I went back to sanding the bench. It's funny how memory works when you're finally ready to be honest with yourself. I used to defend her. Every snide comment, every time she ignored me, every cold birthday text that arrived hours late and said nothing more than HBD. I used to say, she's ambitious. She's overwhelmed. She'll come around. But standing in that garage, my hands coated in sawdust, I realized I'd been lying to myself. She had come around, into her own, into a woman who saw people like me as background noise. I started going back in time, tracing the first cracks. She was 13 the first time she called me embarrassing. I had shown up to her middle school talent show in my mechanic's coveralls, straight from work, grease still on my hands. I clapped louder than anyone. Brought her flowers. She refused to take them on stage. I told you not to come looking like that, she hissed through clenched teeth afterward. I remember I laughed. Sorry, baby, I wanted to be there. She said nothing. By the time she was 16, she refused to ride in my truck. Said it smelled like sweat and sadness. I thought it was just teenage attitude. Hormones. Identity crisis. I let it roll off me. But now I know, those seeds had already taken root. When her mother died, Marissa was 19. That was the last time we cried together. And even then, her tears felt distant, like they were for someone else. She moved out a year later, took an internship in New York, and never looked back. I helped her with the deposit, bought her luggage, packed her kitchenware. She called me once a week the first month, then once a month, then only when she needed something. And I kept answering, because I loved her more than I loved my pride. The phone stayed quiet for 3 days. I didn't expect an apology, but part of me hoped, no, begged, for some kind of reflection. A text, a voicemail, something real. Instead, she posted a picture. Instagram. I only saw it because her cousin tagged me in the comments, not knowing I even had an account. It was a photo of her kitchen counter, The groceries still unpacked, and the caption read, "Some people give love. Some give guilt wrapped in organic kale. Do better." The comments came in fast. "You deserve better, girl. Toxic parents are so good at playing victim. Been there. Healing is hard, but worth it." No one asked for the other side. They never do. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen for a long time and let myself feel every inch of that betrayal. Because that's what it was. Not the insult. Not even the public airing of grievances. It was the rewriting of our history. Our story turned into content for people who don't know my name. Later that night, I got a call from my sister, Joan. She doesn't mince words. "I saw that nonsense she posted," she said. "You okay?" "Getting there," I replied. "She's lucky it was you who raised her. Anyone else would have dropped her off at a fire station by the time she was 10. I chuckled, despite myself. "Thanks, Joe." She paused. "You're finally standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you. But I know it hurts like hell." It did. More than I wanted to admit. Because I didn't want to stop loving her. I didn't want to cut her off. I wanted her to wake up one day and see me clearly. See everything I'd done, not as leverage, but as proof. Proof that I tried. Proof that I showed up. That I didn't just give her life. I gave her a life. But she didn't want to see that. So I decided I wouldn't force her to. The next day, I got up early again. Went to the grocery store. Bought the same items. Eggs, almond milk, yogurt. But this time, I didn't drive them to her place. I drove to a local women's shelter instead. A kind woman at the front desk smiled at me. "You donating today?" "Yeah," I said. "Just a few things." She looked at the bags and said, "Are these for someone specific?" "No," I replied. "Just for someone who might appreciate it." By the end of the week, I turned my phone off. It wasn't out of spite. I just needed the silence. Every buzz, every notification felt like a match being struck, and I was already sitting in too much gasoline. Her voice still echoed in my head. Sharp, indignant, injured, like I had wronged her. And the envelope? She treated that like I'd handed her a live grenade. But what she didn't realize, what she refused to see, was that I wasn't trying to explode her life. I was just trying to stop shrinking in mine. The envelope contained 3 things. 1. The official revocation of the property transfer I'd made 2 years ago, something she hadn't even thanked me for at the time. 2. An updated will, removing her as my primary beneficiary. And 3. A handwritten letter I never intended to send, until she chuckled at me in the rain. In that letter, I told her the truth. I told her I'd signed the house over to her after my second heart scare, that I wanted her to feel secure, that I didn't want her scrambling if something happened to me. I told her I'd canceled my travel plans, sold my old fishing boat, and taken out a reverse mortgage just to pad her future, not mine. That everything I did was so she'd never feel the hunger or fear I once did growing up. But I also told her something else. I told her I couldn't keep handing pieces of myself to someone who only saw me as an obligation. A delivery driver. A charity case with a shared bloodline. And I ended with this. I won't beg to be loved by the child I raised from scratch. I won't keep auditioning for your approval. I gave you everything I had. Now I'm keeping what's left. She came to my house 2 days later. Didn't call. Didn't knock softly. Just pulled into the driveway like a storm with keys and fury. I saw her from the front window, big sunglasses, hair pulled tight, phone in hand, pacing in front of my porch before finally marching up the steps. I opened the door before she rang the bell. "Don't do this here," I said. But she was already halfway inside. "What the hell are you thinking, Dad?" she hissed. "Posting documents in grocery bags like some dramatic soap opera? Do you want attention? Is that it?" I stepped aside slowly, my hands raised like I was calming down a wild animal. "I gave you that house without ever asking for thanks. I gave it because I wanted to. But I took it back because you made it very clear you don't want anything from me unless it fits in your schedule. You're punishing me for being successful," she snapped. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe how far gone we were. "This has nothing to do with your success. It has everything to do with your cruelty." Her lip trembled, just slightly. She wasn't expecting me to say that. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered. "You never do," I said. "But you say it anyway." She looked away, jaw clenched. "So what? You're cutting me off." "No," I said calmly. "I'm setting you free. You don't owe me anything. And I won't keep pretending I owe you my dignity." She scoffed, turned on her heel, and walked back to her car. But she didn't drive away right away. She sat there for almost 10 minutes, staring at her steering wheel. I didn't go out. This time, I let her sit in it. The next week, the fallout began. My cousin, Del, called me on Monday. He follows Marissa on every platform. "Did you see what she posted now?" he asked, voice tight. "No," I said. He sighed. "She filmed a video. Said she grew up with a narcissist father who used money to control her. It's getting shared. A lot." I sat down, feeling the weight in my chest return. Del hesitated. She even mentioned the envelope. I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to. Instead, I asked, "Did she mention who paid for her law school?" "No." "Did she mention who drove her to debate tournaments every weekend for 3 years?" "No." I nodded. That night, I opened her video. It was a dimly lit confessional, with music in the background and tears that didn't quite fall. She spoke in vague terms, but the message was clear to anyone who knew us. She painted me as emotionally manipulative, said I weaponized my acts of service, that I kept score, that I used gifts to create guilt. And people believed her. The comment section turned my stomach. "Cut him off, Queen. My dad did this too. Stay strong. Old men hate when their daughters grow up and don't need them anymore." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, but because I realized she had already rewritten the narrative. She wasn't trying to understand. She was trying to win. And in doing so, she lost something far more valuable than my house. Joan came over the next morning. She let herself in with the spare key. "You all right?" she asked, eyeing the bags under my eyes. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she said. "But you will be." She sat down and poured herself coffee like it was her own kitchen. "That's what siblings do. We don't ask. We show up." "She's spiraling," Jones said. "You hit a nerve." "I wasn't trying to." "I know," she said. "But it's the first time in her life you didn't just let it go." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. I raised a woman who's smart, driven, articulate, and who thinks love comes with a price tag. Joan didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "You raised her to never need anyone. And now she resents you for giving her exactly what you promised." When you've spent your whole life being quiet, people take your silence as permission. Permission to narrate your story for you. Permission to cast you in whatever role suits their comfort. So when I finally chose to say no, not with anger, but with stillness, people didn't know what to do with me. Especially family. It started subtly. Texts from distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Some were just nosy. "Hey, what's going on with Marissa? That post was intense." Others tried to play neutral. "Hope you guys can work it out. Life's short, you know." But a few took sides without asking questions. One evening, I got a call from my brother-in-law, Tom. Marissa had always been close to him. He was a talker, a storyteller, always the fun uncle at Thanksgiving. He didn't bother with greetings. "I just think you should take the video down," he said. "I didn't put it up. You know what I mean. Talk to her. Tell her you didn't mean it. Tell her you were hurt and overreacted." I let the silence build. "I didn't overreact, Tom." He sighed. "She's your daughter." "She is," I said. "And I am her father. Not her punching bag. Not her doormat. Not a prop in her little social media morality play. That video's going viral, you know. People are talking. Let them." He didn't know what to say after that. We hung up in silence. And still, the world spun on. On Wednesday, I went to the grocery store. The same one where I used to shop for her every Thursday night. I stood in the produce section, reaching for a bag of apples, when a woman tapped me gently on the shoulder. "You're Marissa's dad, right?" I turned, cautious. She looked familiar. Someone from church, maybe. Or PDA years ago. "I saw her video," she said. "I'm sorry. That must be hard." I waited, unsure if that was it. But she smiled, kind and small. "You know, not everyone bought what she was selling." That was the first time I felt it. A tiny, flickering light of validation in the darkness. I didn't need it. But God, it felt good to have someone see me, not just judge me. "I always thought you were a good father," she added. "Showed up to every event. Always brought her a snack afterward. Never missed a single recital." She nodded once, then disappeared down the aisle. I stood there for a long moment, hands still resting on the apples. My eyes burned, but I didn't let the tears fall. Not here. Not over something as strange and small as kindness in a grocery store. That weekend, I went to church for the first time in months. Not for God, not exactly. More for grounding. Familiar pews. The smell of old hymnals and stale mints. I needed structure, something ancient to lean on. I walked in just before the sermon, sat near the back, kept my head down. Halfway through, the pastor mentioned family. Sometimes, he said, the hardest thing isn't forgiveness. It's knowing when to stop casting your pearls before swine. He didn't look at me, but it felt like he did. Later that afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized her handwriting instantly. It was short. Just a few lines. I don't know why you did it like that. But I felt it. I don't know what to say that doesn't sound rehearsed. But I'm thinking. No apology. No clarity. But it wasn't rage. It wasn't performance. It was something. And that's when I realized I wasn't just grieving the loss of a daughter. I was grieving the version of her I thought still existed. The little girl who used to run up to me after school and grip my hand like it was the only thing that made her feel safe. That girl was long gone. And the woman she became? She wasn't mine to fix. I showed the letter to Joan the next day. She read it twice, then handed it back. She's still trying to control the narrative, she said. Maybe, I replied. Joan looked at me, softening. But maybe she's also learning what it's like when love doesn't just keep showing up no matter how badly you treat it. We sat in the kitchen in silence for a while. The house was warm, comfortable, but quiet in a way that felt earned. I finally broke the silence. I didn't expect any of this to feel so permanent. Joan nodded. That's the thing about boundaries, brother. They don't just protect you. They reveal the people who only loved you for your compliance. I sipped my coffee, eyes on the window, watching leaves fall onto the driveway. I had spent my whole life showing up for her. Now, for once, I was showing up for me. The thing about letting go is that it doesn't happen all at once. It creeps up slowly, disguised as small choices. You start buying a single carton of milk instead of two. You skip the almond yogurt aisle. You stop checking your phone at night, waiting for a call that used to come like clockwork, short, transactional, clipped. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it. Send me the receipt. Then one morning, you wake up and realize you haven't thought about her in hours. Then days. And when she finally crosses your mind, it no longer aches like it used to. It just lingers, like a bruise that's faded but still tender. I kept the letter she sent, folded it 3 times and tucked it into the drawer where I kept old birthday cards, report cards, and crayon drawings from when she was 6 and still thought I hung the moon. I couldn't throw it out. Not because it offered hope, but because it was real. For the first time in months, Marissa didn't perform for an audience. She reached out without hashtags, without curated grief or filtered tears. Just her handwriting. Uneven. Unsure. But she didn't say sorry. And that mattered. The next Thursday, I went back to the grocery store. Out of habit, more than anything. I walked the aisle slowly. I picked up 2 yogurts, her favorite brand, then put them back. I passed the almond milk, paused, then reached for regular. Old routines have a way of tugging at you like ghosts. But I didn't need to buy for 2 anymore. That part of me had ended. Quietly. Finally, at the checkout line, I noticed the young woman ahead of me fumbling with her wallet. 2 kids tugged at her sleeves, one in a car seat, the other whining about cereal. She looked panicked, embarrassed. I thought I had enough, she said to the cashier, cheeks flushed. She began putting things aside. Cereal, bananas, a pack of wipes. Don't worry about it, I said gently, stepping forward. I've got it. She turned to look at me, eyes wide. You don't have to. I know, I said. I want to. The groceries weren't expensive, but the look on her face? That was priceless. Not gratitude. That came later. What I saw first was relief. As she left, she touched my arm. Thank you, she whispered. Really? Take care of those babies, I replied. I walked to my truck with my bag of apples and milk. Sat there for a while, engine off. It was raining lightly. Not the downpour like before, just a quiet drizzle. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. That night, I wrote a new entry in the journal I used to keep for her. It used to be a log of milestones. First steps, first day of school, first heartbreak. Over the years, it became a place where I poured every hurt I never had the courage to say out loud. The things she didn't hear when I nodded quietly. The apologies I whispered into steering wheels. The grief I swallowed in silence. This entry was different. October 3rd. Today I helped someone who saw me, who thanked me. It wasn't you. But that's okay. I'm learning that love given freely is still love, even when it's not returned. I didn't cry when I wrote it, but I did close the book with a kind of finality. Not bitterness, not anger, peace. A week later, I was walking through the park near my house, something I hadn't done in years. I used to take Marissa there when she was little. She loved the swings, would beg me to push her, higher, Daddy, higher. And when I did, she'd shriek with joy, legs flailing, eyes closed in trust. She used to trust me with everything. Now, she didn't even trust my silence. As I rounded the path, I saw a small volunteer stand. A sign read, "Help us feed families in crisis. Groceries, essentials, dignity." I stood there a long time, reading the flyer. That evening, I signed up. Volunteering wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about replacing her. It was about rerouting the love I'd been hoarding for years, desperate to pour into someone. Anyone. I realized that maybe I was never meant to stop giving. I just needed to give to people who received it with open hands instead of clenched fists. At the shelter, I met Jasmine, 27, single mom, had fled an abusive situation with her 2 kids and a diaper bag. She asked me once, "You got any family?" I smiled. "Had one. Now I've got time." She nodded, didn't pry, just said, "Glad you're here." Weeks passed, and then, one Saturday morning, I checked the mail. There was another letter. Her handwriting again, but this one was thicker, heavier. Inside were photos, old ones. Pictures I hadn't seen in years. Us at the lake. Her in her Halloween costume. The year I hand-stitched it because she changed her mind last minute. Her college graduation, where I stood in the back row because she only had one ticket and gave it to a friend. Under the photos was a note. "I forgot who you were for a while, but these reminded me. I'm not ready to talk, but I'm starting to remember. M." It wasn't an apology, but it was something closer, a memory of love. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel that tiny, complicated flicker of warmth again. Not because I forgave her yet, but because I hadn't stopped loving her. It rained again the following Thursday. Not a storm, just a soft, steady downpour, the kind that makes everything feel a little quieter, a little slower. I watched it from my porch, coffee in hand, wrapped in the flannel robe Joan had given me last Christmas. She'd called it retired grandpa chic. I wore it anyway. I hadn't seen Marissa since the day she marched into my house like she owned it. Since the envelope. Since the groceries. Since the video that went viral for 48 hours and faded faster than the likes it collected. But that morning, as the rain slid down the window pane, I thought of her. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just honesty. I used to believe that being a father meant never giving up, even when it hurt, even when the love felt one-sided, even when the child you raised turned into a stranger wearing your last name like a burden. I thought showing up meant sacrificing my needs, my peace, my pride. But I was wrong. Being a father doesn't mean carrying someone who won't meet you halfway. It means teaching by example, even if that example is letting go. I went to the shelter around noon. Jasmine waved as I came in, smiling with her eyes the way people do when they've lived through worse and come out softer. "We got a new family in this week," she said. "Mom and daughter. Rough shape. We're pulling together groceries if you're up for it." "Of course," I replied. I packed the bag slowly. Apples, rice, crackers, feminine products, wipes, diapers, a toothbrush. I added a note, not signed, not personal. Just a simple message I'd once wanted my daughter to hear. "You are not what you've lost. You are still worthy of love." When I got home, the mailbox was full of junk. Credit card offers, a menu for a new Thai place, and tucked between them, a small envelope. No return address, but I recognized the paper. Marissa's again. Inside was a single photograph. Me, holding her as a baby. My eyes were tired, but my smile was full. She was gripping my collar, face pressed into my neck like I was the safest place on earth. On the back, she'd written just one line. "I want to remember us like this." I sat down on the porch steps, rain soaking the edges of my slippers. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stared at the photo until the ink started to run in the corners. She was trying, not asking to come back, not asking to reclaim the house, not rewriting history again, just trying. But I didn't reach for my phone, because this time I needed time. That night, I cooked myself a full meal, something I hadn't done in years. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans. I poured a small glass of wine, lit a candle, not because anyone was watching, but because I deserved to feel full, too. I took my journal from the drawer and opened to a fresh page. October 10th. She remembers, but I still choose me. Maybe one day, we'll meet again, not as father and daughter fighting to undo a lifetime of resentment, but as two people who finally see each other clearly. Until then, I will not chase. I will not beg. I will live. The next morning, the rain stopped. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, soft and golden. And for the first time in a long while, the silence in the house didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to protect your peace, you're not alone. Tell me, have you ever reached a point where love wasn't enough to stay silent anymore? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about boundaries, grief, and what it means to choose yourself, even when it hurts.